So, why do I think Pusher is so great? Well, Pusher is in my opinion, or what I would believe to be the most realistic depiction of the criminal underworld. The whole trilogy takes place in Copenhagen, Denmark, and shows what it's like to be a pusher. The different aspects of it. The movies are filled with grunge, slum and violence, but instead of glorifying it, it just shows it as it is. Since the movies clearly don't really care about it. Violence and gore are just side effects of what these people are putting themselves through. The darkness is not in the violence on the screen, but the psychological aspect of it all. The movies are more character studies of the general people a person could find in this dark underworld. And that's probably the reason I love these movies so damn much, because they're so darn great at doing specifically that. The title of the video may, yes, very well be an exaggeration, but I still think Pusher does a couple of things better than the classic American gangster movies. For example, the Hollywood gangster movies are very good at glorifying the slum and puts a shine on starting from the bottom and climbing to the top to become a multimillionaire drug lord. Pusher puts the light on the downfall and turns the light down a bit since it's too bright. Puts the movies into the perspective of reality and what it's probably really like, instead of making the underworld out to be something it definitely isn't. Even though the American classics may do a couple of things wrong, there's no doubt they were a big inspiration for this movie. The instructor, Nicholas Winding, throws tons of references to other classics like Taxi Driver, Scarface, Pulp Fiction and more. Movies like that definitely inspired this one, but also the characters, the anti-hero. Each movie revolves around a new character from the world these movies take place in. Pusher 1, Frank. Pusher 2, Tony, Pusher 3, Milo. None of them are really good people, but somehow you still care for them a bit, because they all have and do things that humanizes them, even though they have a lot of bad in them. That's probably also why they seem so realistic, since people in this world in real life also are humans, but yet do things the normal person can't really justify. The world these movies take place in are also fully fledged. The world building is on point. Each movie may not have much to do with each other story-wise, but the reason they are a trilogy and the reason you can feel it's a trilogy is much because of the world building. Breaking Bad did some things wrong in my opinion. I never got a clear understanding of the crime hierarchy. There was Gus, 2 henchmen, Jesse and Walter, and that really felt like it. It was never clear how big Gus's cartel was, hence is why I feel like it seemed too small to be so big. But in Pusher, you have the Albanians, the Turkish, Milo and his crew, XIII and his workplace, Frank, a pusher, his friend from Sweden wanting to buy, hookers, human trafficking, drug addicts who buy from him. You hear how they import dope from Amsterdam. Like the circle, it just seems giant. There are so many pushers, multiple bosses, and you hear where the bosses import these drugs from. The hierarchy is perfectly conveyed and the world feels true and honest. The movie also creates a very interesting dynamic between each character. For example, Frank. He's friends with Milo and Tony. Tony's dad is XIII. XIII has another kid with another woman named Jeanette, which Tony is tasked with killing. This he fails to accomplish in Pusher 2. Milo does business with the Albanians. He ends up owing them some help, so they come over to his crib with a woman they're trying to sell. Then Jeanette shows up trying to buy this woman, showing the consequences from Pusha 2 with his inability to complete his task, looping every single character back to each other, and this it's like with pretty much every single character in all the movies. And this deep connectivity each and pretty much every character has. It's almost like Dark Souls 1, the way they both interconnect the world, so damn perfect. To have this great world, you also have to make the visual aspect fit perfectly. And these movies luckily does as well. The movies are shot handheld, making you as a viewer feel like you're a part of the group and following the main character throughout that day. You are in their shoes and you feel their stress. The contrast between light and dark is so deep that sometimes it almost seems like the shadows paint the people we see on the screen to tell the viewer, listen, this is a dark, dark world. Their faces cast with shadows, so their eyes and cheekbones make the persons look like skeletons, aka dead men walking. The shots are filled with a noise to traverse the grungy underworld these people live in. Bright lights are so sharp that they almost seem glowing, which makes the shots more dreamy, and we as a viewer almost feel like we're under the influence of something while we're watching. The color in these movies also vary a lot, the most prominent ones being the green, symbolizing greed, envy, all that is conventional being broken in these films, and sickness found in the slum. Sick also being used in the underworld as a pseudonym of being under the influence. Yellow is also a very prominent color, symbolizing fear, depression and anxiety and betrayal, and generally also grey and blue being very melancholic, sad, fragile and depressant. In the night which most of these movies take place in, the shots are filled with bright colorful lights, reminding of neon lights. Most prominent color is definitely red, which is also used a lot in the world of sex workers and prostitution. Some of the neon bright scenes could almost remind of what would be acid watch film the way the colors blend on the screen. What do pushers talk about? What are their conversations? What are their friendships based on? These questions a casual person might ask themselves, and Pusher for the most part answers that. Their friendship is much what you would think, a fucked up version of a normal one. They talk about girls they hooked up with, they go to parties and try to pull girls, but instead end up groping women and laugh it off like nothing. When they joke and play, they take out knives and pretend to stab each other. Deep Talks is Frank explaining thoroughly how he brutally beat up a guy in the city. Their friendship is one we don't understand, but what makes it so convincing is when Frank finds out Tony backstabbed him. Tip the police.
Kæft, dreng, I ved ikke noget. Tror du ikke, vi vinder noget som helst? Hvad var det om det, Tony sagde? Handler du meget med Tony, dreng? Prøv at se, hvad jeg har her, Frank. En underskrevet vidneerklæring fra Tony. Er det en god marker? Har et godt kompagniskab? Underskrift. Vidneerklæring. Kom nu, Frank, ikke? Lad nu være at spille hent. Kom nu, Frank.
Men du skylder mig 180 her. Nu.
Det er ikke 180.
Det er.
Milo, det er 120.
Hvor meget vi har aftalt, ja? Hvor meget var det?
120 aftale, og jeg skylder dig 50.000 for sidste uge.
Nej. Frank, ja. Det var 120, ja. Det var, ja. Men nu er 180, ja. Nu er 180, ja. Vil du spørge hvorfor? Spørg.
Hvorfor?
Det er for din historie, som du kommer fra. For den historie.
Basically, Tony signed Frank a death sentence, since Frank now owed $32,000 to his dealer, which is almost impossible to pay off. Frank, out of anger, repeatedly beats up Tony with the bat. I've seen friends fight each other before as well, and afterwards they started crying because they regret their actions. Frank does the same thing, which kinda humanizes him in a situation where most people would lose all respect for him. Because he fucked up. He did something out of anger and now he has to live with it. And most people have something they have to live with.
Fuck!
The title of this chapter is a clear reference to Uncut Gems, but instead of the movie being about gems, it's about drugs. Now, why do I reference this movie? Well, I feel like that movie was almost inspired by this one. Both movies contain the element of stress and a situation that just keeps worsening. Pusher tells the tale of how hectic the life of a pusher can get if just one package doesn't get paid as planned, and how that can lead to, well, to your own demise. Uncut Gems tells almost the same tale, but it's more on a personal level. A man that never catches up to his own lies. But I think that idea makes for a great peek into the underworld. It tells viewers that, hey, we know you think drug dealers just makes tons of money, drive big cars, get jewelry and girls, but in reality it's a world full of hurting. Nothing really ever goes the way you planned, and the movie shows that with its similar style to Uncut Gems.
Hej mor.
Hvordan har du det?
Jeg har meget godt. Har du nogen penge?
One of the saddest scenes in this movie is when Frank visits his mother and asks her for money. She almost has no money as well, but because she loves her child so much, she still gives him all she has left. Because she doesn't want anything bad to happen to him. It's not even close to enough, it's so little he might as well not take it, but yet he takes it all. And as gratitude, she goes in for just one hug. Just one. But he denies it and goes on his way. It's just a really sad encounter in the movie, and after this, Frank's desperation just gets worse and worse and worse. He starts resorting to violence that eventually gets him nowhere. Being desperate is usually not a thing you remember as actually being one of the worst things a person can go through. But this movie reminds you, makes you rethink. A hopeless man is a very desperate and dangerous man. Almost a dead man. Tony comes straight out of prison, which leaves him with zero to little chance of getting jobs. His only hope is asking his dad, who runs a car shop, but even his own dad second guesses him. Pretty much no one believes he's capable of doing anything. He was born into a crime environment, wretched from the start. His own dad hates him with the fire of 1,000 suns. Never liked, never any acceptance. The only way he ever saw to make money was from the things he learned from his dad. A guy worse than himself. That, my friends, that probably creates monsters. Loneliness can really make a person go down a dark road. I think most people have experienced the feeling of being around a lot of people, but yet feeling very alone. At the party we also see Tony just sit for himself and zone out multiple times. He leaves the party and comes back 3 times. But every time he returns in hope of talking with a friend, no one comes up to him. He really has no friends. He really is all alone. Even his dad doesn't care about him. The only friends he has are just using him because they think he's stupid. It's just a really sad thing to see. Being locked to a social group where no one likes you except you. He tries to go back to his mom because they were really close, but just to realize she's passed away without anyone knowing or telling him. He is sadly and truly a person that could fall victim to not feeling like he has much to live for. Even the woman he's had a kid with doesn't want him. She just wants him to fuck off but still give money for support. In the very start, we were told a story by this guy. The message being, Tony needs to spread the message. If you fuck with me, I fuck with you. And that message Tony hasn't spread yet. He hasn't conquered his fear yet. But what is this fear? Throughout the movie, we realize that Tony's dad is a very bad character and influence. And Tony innerly fears him with all his heart. He's everything standing in Tony's way of just receiving the smallest respect by the people around him. So in the end, when Tony kills his dad after years of abuse, he conquers his greatest fear and spread the message to all the people around him. Don't fuck with me. All the people initially making fun of him, looking down upon him, now fear him, since he murked his dad, one of the biggest drug lords in Copenhagen. But personally, I don't think the actual fears his dad. I don't think the message and thing he needed to conquer was his dad's criminal empire. No, I think it's a much simpler story of conquering the fear of becoming a father. When he hears he's become a dad, he doesn't seem to take kind to the idea.
Jeg fik 1100, der kom ud af fængsel, og dem skylder jeg væk. Så den unge, det kan ikke være min. Okay? Sådan kan man sige det.
But there's a scene where he gets to hold his kid, where it seems as if, just for a brief moment, he connects with his kid. It's his offspring. It's him as little. Later we see Tony knowingly letting his dad know, you weren't a good father.
Tænk dig lidt om, nu skal du se at være et godt eksempel for dit barn, ikke?
Ligesom dig.
Ja, ligesom mig.
Showing that Tony wants to do better as a father than the shit he went through as a kid. So after seeing Tony not having any friends, living in a bad environment with no one liking him, the thing he would want to do is escape. So why hasn't he done it? Well, because the actual fear he needs to conquer is escaping this life without it having repercussions, and he sees his newly born kid as that gateway. Therefore, the final scene of this movie is that much more impactful. Seeing his kid's mother sit and snort cocaine till early in the morning, he takes his kid and runs off in hope of a new life. One with friends, one without criminals, one where his kid doesn't go through the same painful abuse he did as a child, one where he becomes the father he always dreamed of having. As you get older, you start to realize maybe you can't really keep up with all these new things and trends around you. And that can be a hard thing to realize and accept, that you're getting older and that things just aren't what they used to. As Mark put it,
Diane was right. The world is changing. Music is changing. Drugs are changing.
Pusher 3 kinda deals with this subject on a more subtle level. I think it's one the more adult viewers will see and find interesting in this movie. The reason we see this is to show that Milo, this well-feared drug lord, is starting to struggle with keeping his empire together, his drug business. and it's really a movie on the downfall, seeing him not being able to keep up with how drugs, selling and dealing are changing. His fucking deals up, getting wrong items imported, trusting people who fuck him over. People don't fear him like they used to. They hustle around with him, he's not the shit anymore, and it's a concept we haven't seen in movies much before. A drug lord who's bad at being a drug lord.
Det er Milo, der sidder hernede. Det er langt til siden, hva'? Hvad laver du her?
Hvad så? Gud.
Nå, det var godt give mig hånden i dag. Kan du se, der er sket en forandring?
Ja. Hvad?
Der kommer hår på kussen. Ja, ikke over det hele, men der er kommet noget.
Kussen med hår.
Jeg er lige kommet hjem fra Norge. Det var ikke en skitur i hvert fald. Men sne var der masser af. Skal der have noget?
Nej.
Bare en enkelt snitte.
Niks.
Nej. Nå, nej forresten. Det var jo blevet heldig. Er du clean?
Clean.
Det er flot. Jeg synes, du sveder lidt.
Hvad kommer fiskene her?
Ja, kom
Du har det godt.
Ja, det kører, ja.
Så. Nå. Jeg tror, du skal ikke have noget kokain.
Nej.
Men noget heroin. Jo.
Nej.
Du siger nej, men du mener ja.
Nej.
Hyg du dig med det, ikke? Pas på dig selv og sådan noget, ikke?
Ja, lige måde. Vi ses, sgu så godt.
Ja, vi gør. Pas på dig selv. Ses.
Ja, hej.
Hvad så? Kommer fiskene, eller?
Ja, kommer på vej.
I find this scene in particular to be one of the most disturbing scenes in film ever, as we see Milo take the heroin and start asking himself, should I or not? We as a viewer are with him, praying don't do it, but the dark sinister music thumping like a heartbeat tells us he's already justifying it. The screams of anguish triumph over, symbolizing the addict screaming for help as he gets dragged back down into addiction. When we meet Milo in the start, he's 5 days clean. He's fighting to make it through his daughter's birthday without relapsing. We keep getting glimpses of what seems to be intense stress or withdrawal symptoms. As a viewer, we almost knew the relapse was inevitable, but we still hope for him to make it. But as the day deemed more stressful than expected, he falls back. It's already been established that he's just managing to get by in this new age, so the fact that he's now getting high of someone's supply, that doesn't make anything better. And we know what happened to the other guy who did the same thing. After this, we see Milo obtain these short and brief but yet very blissful moments in a very dark world. The music conveys the perfect balance of sadness and melancholia, but still silent and peaceful beauty, at least for him. Even though Milo runs a drug business and is a drug addict, he's generally an okay guy. We actually see a guy we used to fear in the other movies in a now vulnerable state as he's trying to survive, which is another side you isn't used to see in movies. Also, he actually cares for people. His daughter he genuinely loves, and we hear how they lost her mother, making you think how Milo may never have intended to sell drugs, but maybe it was the only way for him to survive and earn a living as a foreigner and a single parent, while providing for his child. He's trying to stay away from drugs, and is actually disgusted by the Albanians when they do human trafficking in his crib. He even brings a birthday cake for the woman who's getting sold. And he has an actual great friendship with Radovan. What we're actually seeing is that Milo is a human. He's just a normal human trying to keep his business together. But with getting old and everyone trying to fuck him over, something needs to be done about it. When Milo says,
Frank, du fucker mig! Du fucker mig!
You know he's about to snap, and at last he does. He murks the Polish and saves the woman about to be a sex slave. He ambushes the Albanians and afterward tortures those trying to steal his ecstasy. Afterwards, we see a slow, intense, and probably one of the most disturbing scenes of human dismembering. I feel like this scene should have landed on Wendy Goon's most disturbing movie iceberg. But the goriness of the scene is to show and tell the viewer doing this also costed Milo his own humanity. Desensitized to violence, they take care of their bodies. As we go towards the ending, you see Milo have one last smoke in the early morning after the terrible night, or maybe just common night he's had. Thinking about what he's done or what his next move is, while we as a viewer wonder whether he's able to keep his empire from crumbling. He stands by an empty pool, and the song in the background, Empty Pool, Empty Heart, referencing him no longer having a heart. His empire survived this attack, but will it survive the next? The king looming over us ponders, while the screen fades to black. Every single movie ends with an open ending. Does Frank survive? Does Tony escape the underworld? And does Milo's empire stay afloat? We don't know. These movies being one of the darkest, grittiest and bleakest films I have seen, from far these movies seem to just be about drugs and gangsters, and they are, but on a closer look these movies deal with far more social and philosophical dilemmas that makes you question things you really haven't thought about before. And I guess that's why I love these movies so much. I hope you do as well, otherwise you probably wouldn't have watched this far. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this, and yes, I will make more content like so.